Okay, so I'm not about to wait for you guys to come in here because this is not going to be an interactive live. This is going to be really fast. Um, I said something in my last live that I wanted to clear up. A lot of times, what I do is after a live is over, I'll go back and kind of listen to parts of it, and I heard something, and then I realized that I'm saying it in one context, but I had to remember how those words are being used today. So it can be interpreted one way, and I wanted to make sure that I gave clarity as to what I meant by this whole concept of partnership and 50-50. I want to clear that up. So I said something about dating a guy, and I was talking about you'll end up in a marriage with a guy who wants a partnership and who wants 50-50. And the way that I said it, it was in one context, but it could be misconstrued to be in another context, especially with today's understanding of that. So, what I meant by partnership is you are supposed to have a partnership in a marriage, right? And marriages, in all our honesty, the way that God sets them up, they are balanced. They create balance to the lives of both people. Whenever a marriage does not create balance, it creates insecurity. Whenever a marriage does not create balance, it creates insecurity. So, consequently, what ends up happening is so, what I meant by this, for example, one of the things that's common today, we've had women to fight for women's rights. Women say, hey, I want equal, 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 not understanding that you're really talking at, not necessarily to, you're talking at not just a generation, but a mindset that was popularized and normalized maybe in the 30s and the 40s and stuff like that. Whereas women were constricted where they couldn't go get jobs, they had to rely completely on their husbands. Birth control was out, but it wasn't that popular. And then you had a lot of men who were broken. So consequently, what they saw was a generation of women who were dealing with narcissistic, abusive men. Not all the men, but quite a bit. It was actually relatively normal. It was so normalized that it became culture. So consequently, you had a lot of women that were in relationships with broken men, and the men were cheating on them, the men were beating on them, but they could not leave because that was like a crime. It was a sin for you to leave your husband. And at the same time, they couldn't go get a job to take care of the kids because birth control in that time was not so popular. As a matter of fact, a lot of people, they considered it to be a sin to take birth control. So you had women who had anywhere between 7 to 10 children, and they had all these kids, and they had this guy, and then the jobs that were open to them, which were to be a secretary, a teacher, a nurse, or a cashier, paid 4 times less than what they paid men. So women did not; those jobs did not pay enough to take care of one person, not let alone between 7 to 10 people or what have you. So consequently, you had a lot of women who came through that era who had to stay there. They didn't stay with those men. And I often, whenever I'm talking to guys, and they start talking about they need to go back the way they used to wait. Them women stuck with their husbands, yeah, but they stuck with them through abuse. And you should not ask a woman to stay in a relationship who's being abused, who's being mishandled, who's being cheated on, or what have you. So consequently, they stayed. So then we had this equal rights movement where women said, hey, we want equal rights. Not It wasn't that a lot of women were saying, hey, we want to be men. But what was happening was a lot of women were saying, hey, we don't want to be stuck in these relationships. We want to be able to provide. We want to be able to provide for our families or what have you. So you saw an increase in divorce. And a lot of guys blame that, the equal rights movement for, the rise in divorce. And part of it is true, but most of it isn't. The rise in divorce came about when women started to realize that, hey, I don't have to stay in here and be abused, right? And then people started getting more of an education about birth control, so women started getting on birth control. All of the same, there's a lot of immoral things that came in as well. So there's a lot of stuff that came in, and so now you had women that, women nowadays say, hey, I don't have to take you hitting me, I don't have to take you abusing me, I don't have to take you hurting me, I don't have to take you being condescending, I don't have to take all of this stuff. So you had women getting out of the relationships. However, when you have nowadays, you have a lot of there's this mindset. So we're kind of like in the midst of another shift. There's this mindset where you have a lot of guys who, and not just guys, women who are holding fast to the traditional role of the woman, of the wife, all the while expecting modern day privileges, right? And what I mean by that is you have a lot of guys that say, hey, I want a wife that cooks clean, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is perfectly fine. But you can't expect what they did in the old days and expect her to work a 9 to 5. So when people say 50-50 or partnership, they're typically saying, I want you to clean up, but I want you to have a 9 to 5. I want you to take sole responsibility of the children, but I want to work a 9 to 5 and then I come home. That's it. I don't want to have to do anything else. That's your responsibility to make sure the children to cook and to clean, make sure the children are fed, help them with their homework, make sure they take a bath, break up the fights, and what have you. I want that would be your sole responsibility, but you also got to pay 50% on the bills. You also got to pay 50% on the bills. So that's what I mean when I say a partnership. That's why I say, because that's not 50-50. It's 50-50 on paper, but in reality, it's not 50-50, because then the woman becomes the primary doer in the relationship. The woman does most of the work. And she has to take on most of the emotional responsibility and the weight. And she has to even take on the spiritual responsibility of covering her home in prayer. Whereas the guy is still locked in the traditional role of going to work, coming home, and sitting down and waiting on a hot meal and not having to worry about the children, and then expecting sex at the same time when he goes to bed. That's what I meant. So I wanted to come out here. I got food on the table. It's I got soup, and it should be cool now. But I wanted to come out and give clarity as to what I meant. Marriage is a partnership, and by default it is. And I won't say 50-50, because the Bible says the wife is a weaker vessel. I genuinely believe, and this is just me being a woman and seeing the role of a woman, I do believe that women give a lot of times a lot more. And I think that you can balance it out. It depends on each household. But I also believe that when you are trying to mix modern day with tradition, you will create an even greater imbalance. Whereas it is safer and sounder for the woman to not even marry than to take on the bulk of the responsibility. Because if she's paying 50-50 for the bills, but you're not doing 50-50 around the house, that's not a partnership. So that's what I meant by that. So I wanted to clear that up, because I know that it can sound, like I said, based on today's definition, it can sound like I'm saying that marriage shouldn't be a partnership and there shouldn't be a 50-50 in there. I don't necessarily believe in 50-50. I believe it's the same concept when it comes to friends. So in friendships, there are seasons where I give 70% to my friends and they're giving me 30% in return. There are seasons where I'm giving 90% to my friends and they're giving me 10% in return. But there's a season where it shifts, right? Then there are seasons where we're kind of eye to eye. So that's where relationships look like they kind of move or what have you. And I believe the same is true in relationships. I believe that a wife should be a helpmeet. I believe that the wife should be bringing in bread in the house. She can work from home. She can do a lot of things. I believe that it's up to you as a marriage. You create your own culture. You create your own thing with your marriage. Every marriage doesn't look the same. You create your own thing, or what have you. But at the same time, you have to be mindful that you don't try to mix tradition with modern day and come up with this idea of, okay, the woman's supposed to cook, clean, have babies, raise the babies, and do all the other stuff where the man just goes to work and comes home. So that's what I meant. I wanted to make sure that I gave clarity. Yeah, he's supposed to cover. The man's supposed to cover. He's supposed to be the protector and provider. That is a biblical thing. He's supposed to be this is what God does. So he's supposed to be a representation of God and home. He's supposed to be a representation, but a wife is a helpmeet. So she's supposed to help him. She's supposed to help him with the business, help him with whatever it is. She's supposed to be a helpmeet. So that's the thing. So I wanted to make sure, because if you get caught up in numbers, you will enter into what I meant by partnership. I meant by roommates. I think that's the best way. You will end up being romantic roommates with one another. Whereas he's asking for 50% of the bills. He's saying, where's your 50%? And what have you. But then yet and still, he's not. Then now you're fighting because he's not doing his half of the house. And that's a crazy, weird relationship where you say, well, you're supposed to do the bathroom this week. You're supposed to do the kitchen this week. You're supposed to do this week. When it's your week, you don't never do your part. Those type of relationships are set for doom. So you want to make sure that you set the stage for what you want to have. But when I said partnership and when I said 50-50, I meant it in a different context than what is understood today. So after I heard that, I'm like, let me clear that up while my soup is cooling off, and I'm about to go up in there and I'm about to enjoy me some soup. So I love you guys. I hope I cleared it up. I hope I made it I hope I made it a little bit better or what have you. So Marriage is beautiful, is wonderful when you have two people who are mature, who love the Lord. They love the Lord first, and they're mature. They're matured in the things of God. They're mature in the natural. There are two mature people who have learned to communicate. Communication is very necessary for relationships. It's beautiful when you have that, and so you can create your own thing because not every marriage looks the same. Again, but when you can create your own thing, what have you. But at the same time, like I said, marriage is your wife is a help me because if the husband loses the job, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say it out loud. You should be able to help with the bill. You should be able. Matter of fact, you're gonna help with the bills if you're married. Like if you have your own business, you're both putting in. Most of the time, you may even have a joint bank account. So it's not he paying or this is yours or what have you. But like I said, it's different for everybody. Everybody has their own beliefs in their own marriage. I don't judge anybody's structure for their marriage. That's their thing, and it has everything to do with their personality and their beliefs or what have you. But um, I wanted to make sure that I cleared it up. Once you get into a marriage, I'm going, I promise. But once you get into a marriage or once you start dating a person, you're supposed to work those details out, right? You're supposed to work those details out. So if your husband loses a job and money not coming in, you should be able to sustain it. You should be managing money, making money. The Bible talks about that in Proverbs 31. You should be a help me. It should not be, honestly, I think that a healthy marriage, you don't really identify who's doing what. Did I make sense with that? You can't say he's doing the most or I'm doing the most. When it's in balance, you can identify that. But when there's a healthy marriage, you typically are not going to be able to identify how much he brings in and how much you bring in because y'all are real partners. There's nothing wrong with being partners. You should be partners, but you are both bringing in. So when you have a healthy marriage, it's going to move like that. But when it's unhealthy, you will have a couch potato who is probably working a part-time job or working and coming home and doing what he want to do and expecting you to do the rest. You will have a son. All right, you have a son. All right, that's what I wanted to say. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.